I believe that well done technology products in a way create a sense of curiosity to make people want to download it and try it. And that's what we're trying to get to.
Hello and welcome to episode 53 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. My name is Anthony Spiteri. In this episode, we're talking to a company who is looking to liquefy compute, network, storage, and GPUs from bare metal servers, using those liquefied resources to create multi-tenant virtual data centers. The company's software creates a fully integrated virtual cloud software stack to build, deploy, and manage virtual data centers. That company is Verge IO. I'm talking to Yan Ness, CEO at Verge IO. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
Excellent. So just before we get into a lot of the great things that you guys are doing at Verge.io, I just want to give a bit of a shout out. So if you love with great things with great tech and would like to feature in future episodes, you can click on the link on the show notes or head to GTwGT.com and register your interest. As always, all episodes of GTwGT are available on all good podcasting platforms: Google, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all hosted and distributed via anchor.fm. That'll keep you up to date with all the shows, as well as YouTube. Hit that subscribe button and all that jazz. Okay, yeah, now that we've got all that out of the way, welcome to the show, number one. Great to have you. I really am impressed with is it Verge.io? IO is part of the name?
Yeah, Verge.io. Some people tease me and call me Verge IO.
Verge
IO. Vergian sometimes, but yeah, Verge.io.
There you go. It's pretty common these days, right? I think that IO domain basically lends itself to all the cool company names, eh? So we know quite a few like that. So just wanted to clarify that so we can keep on going. But hey, maybe just to start with, just give a bit of a background about what Verge IO does, and then I'm really interested in diving into your career and how you got started in the lead up to the company that is now Verge IO.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Anthony. This is a great podcast, by the way. So Verge.io, we have an operating system effectively, and ultimately what it does is just greatly simplify the IT stack. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why we believe that's actually really needed by the world. When you hear my background, you'll see why I felt the pains of not having of complexity, let's say. And so we do that by reimagining the entire stack as one single piece of software and one virtualization encapsulated thing. So think everything from storage, including things like bit rot protection, all the way up to BGP and managing your appearance on the internet through your public IP address, and everything in between. Our software virtualizes that, and the unique aspect of it is that it doesn't converge multiple things into one. It is just one thing to begin with, which has all kinds of architectural advantages that I'm sure we'll get to today.
Yeah, I think that that makes sense. Obviously, a lot of the people listening, and from my background as well, understands that traditionally all those things that you mentioned are separate entities, right? And without question, the public cloud, the hyperscalers have tried to sort of bring those all together, but to a certain extent, they are still that separate entity. And it's actually a rare sort of product that I can see you guys are sort of offering, where you're kind of taking that approach, but condensing them all into one, like liquefy. I think that's a really good way to describe it, actually. And kudos to whoever came up with that way to describe what you guys are doing, because you're kind of liquefying all those things and putting it into one through the software. But talk a little bit about your background. You kind of highlighted it. You've had a pretty interesting career in terms of startups, entrepreneurship, and actually you came out of retirement to basically lead this company. So they had to be doing something right to get you out of retirement. But maybe just give a bit of background on yourself first.
Yeah, sure. So, as a kid, I tinkered with computers as a kid. Got a computer science degree from the University of Michigan here, and I've long since sort of stepped out of the technology bucket and more into running businesses. But my background, I've loved software since the first day. I mean, I've been around since MS-DOS days, right? Even before that. and software changes the world. It changes absolutely everything. And I was just fascinated by what you can do with a piece of software. And so I had a couple early good software companies that did well in the 80s and 90s. I've been a serial entrepreneur my whole life. And then most recently, before I retired, I bought a small dial-up ISP, believe it or not.
Okay.
And then through a handful of acquisitions and organic growth, built a pretty robust, by the end of the game, it was, we were basically the #1 cloud hosting provider in the United States that delivered HIPAA compliant cloud and hosting. So originally it was dial-up, and then it was co-location, then dedicated servers, and then VMware came around, and we can talk about that. So I watched that transition. I'll never forget the first time we played with that.
Yeah.
And then, then cloud came about, and then private cloud, and then reselling public cloud, and then sold that in 2017. And I tried retirement, didn't really work out for me. We can get into some of that. And here I sit at Verge.io right now.
There you go. So you've kind of, I mean, the parallels, obviously I've been doing this thing for 20 years, and I actually started still with dial-ups, though it wasn't the actual, modems in a rack. It was more the AS 3400s or whatever it was, the Cisco machines that had all those modems in there. But definitely I was part of that first sort of hosting wave and the virtualization wave on the other side, right? So it's interesting how a lot of these careers parallel and what we've kind of evolved into, which is this modern platform, this modern way of doing everything better that we used to do. And I think Verge IO is definitely doing that. You did mention a little bit about that retirement phase. So what did you do during retirement? You kind of teased that, right? So I had to ask.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we sold the business, had a really fantastic outcome. We had grown the top line 40-fold in 8 years, and I did that actually by focusing on software. Sold the business, and the new buyers had their own leadership team, which was fine. To be just to be totally honest with you, at first I was like, wait a minute, I've been building this company for 10 years. How am I supposed to give you the keys and then just be gone the next day? I got to help you run this thing, right?
Yeah,
and so at first I was like, wait a minute, they don't want me. I thought I was important guy running this business, right? You're like, hey, wait a minute. But I do remember, I'm a very goal-driven person, and I had written down in my goals as a younger kid. I had sold a software company to Liberty Mutual, an insurance company, in my 30s, and I had to go with the sale and work 2 years and had to earn out and all that stuff. And I had written down, and I'd forgotten this. This is important for all you young entrepreneurs. I had written down something saying, I want to build a company that has so much intrinsic value that they don't need me and they're willing to pay full price for it. And then I was reading some goals, and then I remembered, wait a minute, this was what I really wanted all along.
That's it.
And I wonder why. And so we closed the deal. The next morning, I turned in my laptop, my keys, and I didn't even have access. We had 7 data centers, and I was just gone. It was a huge vacuum in my life. And
yeah, I can imagine.
And it was just one last point. One of the interesting things was, so I'd spent my life, being an entrepreneur, and you entrepreneurs out there know this. You work a lot and you love what you do. Both of those two things have to be true, or you're not going to be successful, by the way. And so all of a sudden I had this vacuum, and I don't hunt, I don't fish, I don't do gardening, I don't do woodwork, I don't do artwork. I run tech companies. And so after about a year of, I do a lot of sailing. So we sailed all over.
I was going to say, you must have done something.
I did sailing and travel with my wife for a little while. And then we started fighting over the TV remote, and I'm not so sure, what am I going to do? So I started looking for something to sink a little bit of money and my time into.
That's awesome. Well, there you go. And so that's where Verge is now. So Verge IO in itself has a fairly interesting history, right? So it's kind of, now if I was to say Yottabyte, I think a few of the listeners who have grown up in the VMware world would know about Yottabyte, but just maybe talk about how, from, I guess, the 2010s, how Yottabyte came into being and what it was, and how, through the years, it's kind of evolved into Verge IO.
Yeah. So our founder, Greg Campbell, who's absolutely just a brilliant software engineer, was trying to write a search engine in 08, 09. And as he was writing that search engine, a search engine has to be able to do millions of searches and search millions of things and give millions of people responses in a quarter second. He found that he kept running into infrastructure limitations. What he wanted, no one server could handle it. So what he wanted was a piece of software that he could install on 30 servers, and it would make it look like one big, huge, massive server. And his application didn't have to worry about that. And he likes to solve difficult problems. So he stopped working on the search engine and worked on this infrastructure software. And the storage is the hardest part of it all, actually. And so he formed a company called Yottabyte. By the way, a yottabyte is 1 trillion terabytes. So it's a lot of data.
Yep.
And so he built this thing, and the short version of the story is he did it in such an elegant, simple way. It is the only software-defined storage that can address a yottabyte. Now, you never would do that practically. You never could do that practically. But he began by completely rethinking how storage works, and it's absolutely brilliant what he did. And I watched this company because I was here in Michigan and he was in Michigan, and I watched them kind of come out, and it was an amazing piece of software. But sometimes you need more than just an amazing piece of technology to be successful in the market.
Yeah, there's a big saying: the best tech doesn't always win, or hardly ever wins, right? So yeah, that's correctly true. So in terms of what that was from a storage, it obviously search needed storage, needed scale. That was formed the basis for the platform. And then looking through the history, in about what are we looking at here? About 2015, 2016, that's when the Verge OS stack started to come together. Is that kind of how the Yottabyte evolved into what the stack is today?
Yes. So basically, if you look at the IT industry, and we've been around long enough to have seen it evolve into these sort of silos of products and technology. So you've got storage, you've got the hypervisor, you got the networking, you got security, you got operations, and each of those are sort of silos. And like, it's not like somebody in 1989 or 92 said, hey, let's organize IT this way, and then all these companies were built. They kind of sprang up out of innovations, right? Well, what Greg did, he said, something, it's a mess. It's complicated. There's too much orchestration between these things. So he took the core Yottabyte technology and he added a hypervisor to it. And the hypervisor knows how the storage works, which you can get some real architectural advantages in that case. And then he virtualized layer 2, layer 3 networking. Well, the networking knows how the hypervisor knows how the storage works. And all of this is done in a language he invented that includes orchestration, security, encryption, global data deduplication are all inherent in the way the entire stack is written. So you end up with this actually very, very thin layer of software that it doesn't converge all those silos, because it's not like you started with these silos and then smooshed them together. Yeah. He actually reinvented sort of one big silo that with one thin piece of software, sort of includes everything from all the bit rot protection and storage and all that kind of stuff you need, all the way up through BGP and managing your public IP presence.
Yeah, it's tough putting all those together. And so I'm guessing, everything that's part of the OS, because it is, like, from what I'm seeing now, it's an OS, and we'll get to kind of how it's installed and how it's kind of architected a little bit later on. But what you're saying is, he's taken potentially, well, it's KVM-based hypervisor. Has that been, slightly modified, at the kernel layer or whatever to actually, connect through the storage, which connects into the networking, like you said? So it's fully modified within this package to deliver what you say it delivers.
Yes. And by the way, other than that piece of software, 100% of the software is ours. We don't license anything from anybody else. It's 100% written by, I know some people will like this, some people might not, but it's 100% written by, U.S. citizens right here in the state of Michigan, under Greg's, a very, 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 very discerning eye. None of it's outsourced, none of it's licensed. We own 100% of everything that's there except the KVM piece.
Oh, that's amazing. That's cool. So let's talk about the actual software. So Verge OS. So what is Verge OS? Because what I've seen and what I actually started to download. I didn't get time to actually play with it today, but I promise you I'm going to do that. We talked about that actually in the pre-show, didn't we? Just a good bit of software is something that you can look at and go, hey, I want to install that and tinker with it. That's exactly what I've got with this. So just a word out there for everyone listening. If you want to do it, go to the Verge IO site and actually download it. But effectively, you install it on a couple of, in a cluster scenario, say bare metal, I'm guessing you can actually potentially install it in a virtual environment as well to test as well. Is that a possibility to get a bit of a feel for it as well? Or
no, don't install it on a virtual environment, because I mean, we are the boot op. You can, but you're not. It's not really going to work the right way. That's not how it's intended. I mean, so we by the way, just to be clear, you can't download the software yet. You can get a free. You can use it. We host it. You can click a button and fill out a form, and we'll turn over to you in a matter of minutes a dashboard, and you can play with the software. So you don't have to install it. But stay tuned. Big announcement coming next month.
There you go.
Really big announcement.
Heard first. Well, kind of heard first.
There you go. But we like to lead with the product. The product is what we've given it to a number of editors, and we're glad to get you a copy of the software even today, Anthony, if you want. Stick it on a couple servers. And to me, it was almost like the first time I played with Windows or the first time I played with an iPhone. It's like, wait a minute, this kind of changes everything. I'm not that technical a person anymore, but I could install it, grab my mouse and start, specifying SAN tiers, build out a few networks, put in some ACL, run a couple recipes to create, a handful of Linux or Windows servers. And 30 minutes later, I've got up and running infrastructure that I can do something with. And so we want to get the software in as many people's hands as possible, as soon as possible, to play with it and try it. And a number of editors have done that, and you can, if you go to our website or elsewhere, you can read about screenshots and everything about how easy it is to install and deploy this thing. It's very, very clever.
Yeah, there's some good videos actually as well that I saw on your website as well. So the official YouTube channel and whatnot. So definitely go and have a look at that. So from the point of view of what they're getting. So what I guess the one question I haven't asked yet is, and it's kind of logical, but what problem is it trying to solve? Why does Verge IO exist?
Yeah, that's a great question. So ultimately, it's trying to solve complexity. And why is complexity a problem? Well, everybody knows that complexity creates risk. It creates staffing skills gap, right? It creates expense. It hurts agility. Complex means it's harder to secure. And so that's the top layer. One layer below that, our customers say, man, my patching here, just to get really, really tactical here, my patching schedule went from just an absolute confusing mesh of patching, sequencing. First do your switch, then do your router, then do this, then do that, then do this, then do that. Uh-oh, that one didn't work. Undo, 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 undo.
Yep.
And for service providers especially, I don't know how people run their companies today, but at my prior company, every time we patch something, we let all the customers that were going to be affected know. Hey, we're doing a patch.
Yep. It's always a heart and mouth situation, that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And for us, our MSP and hosting customers say patching is now a non-issue for them, because there's just one thing to patch, and it's an encrypted patch, and it's a zero downtime patch. It's really easy. So patching is one example. There's a bunch more that we just sort of, like the IT guys go, oh, I got my Saturday nights back. God, this is so much better.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of other examples like that when you step back and simplify something to its core.
Yeah, you know what? I'm 6 and a bit years out of the game, hands-on game. Back when I was lead architect at my previous role, and I think I've almost repressed the memories of what you just talked about, the planning meetings that we used to go through to plan a VMware upgrade or an NSX upgrade, or whether it was an antivirus component or a backup component. So yeah, you're correct. There's so many different pieces that you have to think about, and actually, the more complex or the more sophisticated IT got within the hosting space, the more complex it became. Because if you thought about it, maybe maybe now 15 years ago, when we first started in virtualization specifically, It's pretty easy. There's a couple of virtual machines, or Windows or Linux, easy stuff, right? A SAN, whatever it might be. Then you got hyper-converged, and you got the networking built into it. Then you've got all these external extensions, and the extensibility came into place. So now you've got the plugin to do this, to do that, and everything basically added up to, if we change one of these particular plugins or extensions or whatever it might be, is it going to break the whole system? And inadvertently, the answer was yes. So sometimes you're actually stuck on upgrades where you couldn't actually upgrade because you weren't sure you were going to be able to come out the other side. So that alone is a very, very tangible reason to consider, your solution effectively.
Yeah, it's a great one. So here's a story about complexity. So an online tech, it's now called Otava. That was my prior cloud company. What I feel like the cloud did, and all the MSPs and hosting providers, they made it look simple. So you go to an enterprise and say, look, I'm going to give you one bill. It's going to be, $18,000 a month, and you're going to get all this stuff, and your life is simple. You didn't make anything simple. You just hid the complexity.
Yeah.
And inside our company, we had a whole software development team that did nothing but orchestration. So we used tools like Veeam and VMware and Pure Storage and Cisco routers and NSX and all these other things. And every time we wanted to allow the customer to do something simply, we had to write a ton of software. And that was our competing point was, it's a commodity service, right? Well, we're going to give you a portal where everything is in one place. And so when I saw Verge, I was like, wait a minute. This actually does make it simple. If I'd have had this at my hosting company, my EBITDA margins would have been 30, 50% higher.
Interesting.
And my customer still would have seen a simple thing, but it would have been simple for me too, which means it would have been better for them. Public cloud is the same thing. It makes it look, or it did originally make it look simple, but it's very complicated inside what they're doing there. It's extremely complicated. Yeah. And now it's not even simple anymore.
No, it's absolutely not. It's absolutely not.
You need FinOps and all kinds of things to make that work. So we think there's an opportunity there to help solve some problems for people.
Yeah, so I want to touch back on the public cloud thing a little bit later, but I think I wanted to sort of talk about, where you sit with regards to, VMware and vCenter, and even not even picking on them. Obviously, they're the biggest incumbent, but even like Hyper-V and Microsoft and wherever they might be, Nutanix has got their own hypervisor. I've personally noticed a lot of KVM infiltration over the past 12 to 18 months. Seems like it's growing. So is that kind of the market that you're looking to sort of unseat? Not the KVM, but obviously the VMware sort of market that's out there. Is that who you're targeting specifically, or do you work side by side with them for migration as well? Like what's the scenario there?
Great question. So we target Nutanix and VMware. I mean, just to be straight up front, we think we have a much more cost-effective, simple, secure, agile solution than either one of those. And both companies, I have great respect for both companies. Really good technology, unbelievably successful. If we have 1% success they had, it would be great. So I have massive respect for what they've done. But both of them have bumped their head up against what's called the innovator's dilemma, which it's very hard for them to innovate, and they are at, as they should be. It's a capitalist world. They are at cash extraction from their customer mode. Both of them are. The acquisition of VMware is going to cause some angst, and we're seeing a lot of angst. We're getting a lot of response to that. Nutanix has had their own sort of pivot to a software company, and maybe they're going to go private and so forth. And those are big distractions. And anytime a business, and I know this because I've done it before, has a distraction that takes even just 1 second of your eye off of your customer, that's an opportunity for companies like us to step in and say, our North Star is making life easier for the customer. And that's never, ever, ever going to change. And we think there's power in that message. So yeah, we are displacing VMware. We are displacing Nutanix. We are displacing Hyper-V. We are displacing Scale for the reasons that we claim we should be, is because it's just simpler, beside the fact it's about a third the cost.
Well, okay, yeah, that's all. You're almost selling it. You've almost sold it to me. That's for sure. No. I think it's an important one though to talk about, because obviously, like you said, I've used this a few times this week, the headwinds, right? Headwinds are coming at VMware, and they do have a problem of incumbency, which is usually a strength. But I think in this world, when you're not delivering value to your customers or anything new, then what are you delivering really? What are you offering? And if you're just going to get more expensive, then that's a problem. So you're correct there. And I guess what you guys have done is focused on that migration part, right? So from what I've seen, again, I saw another video. I might link to it. It's just a really easy 1 or 2 step process to actually hook up to a vCenter and migrate into a Verge IO platform. So you've made it simple to move across, which in theory is normally the hardest thing to do, right? Is to have confidence in that when you're shifting to a platform, you can move with ease.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and people have done some very interesting things with that. So we had one customer do a full hardware migration, because what you can do with Verge IO you can't do with any other of these operating systems is, so you could have a Verge stack running on 10 R620s. I got to replace those with new bigger boxes. So what our customers do is, since we don't care. We can mix AMD, Intel. We can mix. We don't care what it is. We hide that complexity from you. So you add a couple of your brand new boxes, and you let the workloads kind of peanut butter across everything. And then you go to one of the nodes that's like 7 years old, and you shut it down, and everything keeps working. And then you add another new node, and then you shut down one of the old nodes, and then you add another new node, then you shut down one of the old nodes, and so. By first ingesting all of your VMware environment, we are a VMware partner. We can plug into vCenter and we can bring all your VMs in, and then you just start them.
Okay.
And then you begin doing your hardware migration to your new hardware platform. Again, it's just all about making things simpler. So we've made integration from or migration from VMware to us, obviously, as easy as we could. And originally, our original use case there, Anthony, was that we were going to have a DR product for VMware, but we realized, companies like you guys, Veeam and others has got that all sewed up, and will never, ever, ever compete there, because you did such a phenomenal job.
Let the pros be the pros. Yeah. That's what we like to say.
Really, you guys have, I've used Veeam since you guys were a startup, and it's really, really well done. So yeah, we make the migration really, really, really easy.
That's awesome. So there's definitely the use cases there, and it's right in terms of the encapsulation of the data center above the storage, making it all a holistic sort of view. The dashboard is very complete as well if you take a look at it. So if you spend a bit of time obviously making, because I think the one thing that us platform guys still kind of need is visuals. We need to know what the system's doing. We need to know how much CPU is consumed, what storage we've got. We need to see the graphs, the monitoring, observability. I'm not a big fan of that word, but we need to see the observability part of it. So you've done a bit of that as well. Just before we go on to that a little bit, I just wanted to talk about the public cloud, because if there's definitely been a shift that I've noticed in talking to analysts and media and PR, people are definitely embracing the hybrid cloud world, which means that they're not going holistically into the public cloud. They're not being sold the glory that once was about the public cloud, right? They're seeing the faults. You kind of mentioned it earlier around complexity and cost and whatnot. But how do you attack when you go to a customer and they say, hey, well, I want to put everything into AWS, but tell me Verge.io why I should go with you instead?
Good question. So if somebody's already committed to going to AWS, we're not going to try to convince them not to, just to be because there's so much momentum there. But what is happening is people are beginning to look for alternatives to AWS for one of two reasons. It's just at scale, and for persistent workloads, it's wildly expensive. It's like living in an apartment. It's like living in a hotel room for a year. You use hotel rooms for, hey, I need a room for 3 nights in Cincinnati. I need a room for 5 nights over here. You use them for agility. If you have a really long-term persistent need to be someplace, you wouldn't pick a hotel room. You would rent an apartment. And Andreessen Horowitz did that great article. There's $1 trillion of missed value in the marketplace because people are spending so much money on persistent workloads where the real value proposition
Can I just say, gotta say that's a brilliant analogy, and that's the first time I've heard that. And kudos for breaking it down like that. If you don't mind, I might borrow that down
Go
the
for
track.
it. It's all yours.
I mean, it's out there now, isn't it? But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you're correct, right? And that's awesome. So yeah, okay, we got 10 minutes left, which is good. The timer is ticking, but hey, let's try and get through. I told you this could go real quick.
Yeah.
I think the other part of that whole public cloud thing, it's all about how you consume it. I've always been a fan of the fact that people want to consume the cloud as the cloud, and it doesn't matter where it is. So if the cloud is actually consumed on premises in some way via an API or via some infrastructure as code or whatever it might be, that then makes it the consumption model of choice. So if you guys, and I notice that you guys have got a strong API, so that's obviously very important as well.
Yeah. So here's the way I look at the public cloud, and some of it's a little stained in my opinion. I'm gonna make a statement a little controversial here, but
that's okay. We love that. I love that.
The public cloud's a little bit like ransomware to me.
Oof. Okay.
Once I go there, once I put all my data there, and they make it real cheap and easy to do that. Have you ever tried to get a petabyte of data out of AWS? It's expensive. Well, that's what ransomware is, isn't it? I got your data. I got your, and so to me, it's like, be careful if you start with it. And the second thing is about public cloud. The future workloads, we think people are going to care where the compute is done, especially if you think about, now this is kind of long-term visions, but autonomous cars, smart intersections, that kind of stuff, you need to do the compute within about 10 or 15 milliseconds where your sensors are.
Yep.
Okay. And so the round trip to go to an AWS or an Azure data center, from some intersection in Oklahoma to Seattle and back isn't going to cut it. And so actually, we think people are going to start caring where that workload is being done. And so, and if you look at AWS and Azure, they're all doing this. They're trying to fit their cloud into a suitcase.
Yes.
But there's two problems with that. Number one, what they built is designed to run in a secure building surrounded by just world-class $300,000 a year experts. Guess what? You don't have those at all the intersections. You can't use anything. All the architecture they built is extremely complicated. And so you can't fit that in a shoebox. Number two, their business model is all tied to this like ransomware thing. I got you trapped. Well, that's not going to work in 1,000 different locations. And so what we've done is our software is so simple, and we have customers doing this. They install us on 2 Intel NUCs that draw between the two of them less than 100-watt power ball.
Yeah.
Drop into a shoebox. You don't even need a switch. You just plug us directly into your providers, into whatever, or your WAN or whatever you're connected to, and it fits in a shoebox. And you've got nested virtual data centers that can be compliant, that are secure, that are encrypted, and that will synchronize using global data deduplication back to maybe a closet, and then synchronize from there to maybe bare metal servers at AWS. And so we can provide this one single, simple, thin platform. It can run anywhere, and at NUCs and at scale. We have won business against VMware and Nutanix because we scale better than they do. And I can get to that if you're curious.
Yeah, the scaling is definitely interesting. I'm not sure if I would love to get into it. Maybe it might be for a part 2 episode at some stage. But I did want to touch on modern platforms. You mentioned the cloud and where it's going, and modern platforms right on the edge and whatnot. Where do you see Verge IO playing in terms of, obviously you've got KVM as the hypervisor, things like containerization, Kubernetes. Are you guys looking to play at that space as well? Because from what I've seen at the moment, you're obviously virtual machine based from the workloads, but where's the future there?
Yeah, good question. So our North Star, everything we do in our product roadmap is going to be tied to making things simpler. So you're going to see us not offer an alternative to Kubernetes. You're going to see us, and a lot of our customers run containers on our infrastructure. So that's not something we don't do today. But
yeah.
But what you would see us do is make that easier, make that simpler, make that easier for you to move those containers around and do things with them and share them and so forth. But we also think that ultimately those containers are too atomic. Like we think of ourselves as a container, but our container holds the entire virtual data center. So,
Yes.
so you can create a container, a virtual data center that has 10 Windows, 10 Linux servers in it, all the BGP, all the firewall, all the storage, everything, and you could pick that container up and drop it on to any other Verge installation, including your public IP address, and just click and run it. So we love the notion of containers, and
That's
you would
awesome.
see us make that easier, not try to replicate what they do.
Brilliant. Excellent. I'm looking forward to that as well. So just quickly, we mentioned MSPs and service providers. So obviously, I believe this would be awesome for the MSP and service provider space. Are you kicking goals there? Is that kind of one of your go-tos in terms of your market segments?
Yeah, small and medium-sized MSPs are a great space for us because they're getting margin compression.
Yep.
They can't make money reselling VMware. They can't make money reselling Hyper-V. They can't make money reselling any of the high growth legacy guys and gals. I mean, public cloud, they can't make money reselling that. So they sort of end up being, kind of a service organization. And we solve that margin problem for them.
Good stuff. All right. So let's just finish off with those two questions. So I guess, how did you initially, what's your take on how you initially disrupted the market? What's made Verge successful? I've noticed that just recently you announced a 3x or 300% sort of, revenue gain. How are you making those sorts of gains in the market via the disruption today?
Yeah, so some of that is look, we're just kind of a little bit lucky. There's a lot of disruption going on in the legacy providers right now. And so we're taking advantage of that because people are lifting their head up and saying, hey, what else is there out there? And so that's been tailwinds to us. We can't take credit for that. We're taking advantage of that. But it is simplicity. I mean, if you talk to our customers, and we don't lose customers, we never lose customers. They always buy more because at the end of the day, they're like, if I leave you guys, I got to hire more people, spend more money, and my life goes back to 2 a.m. work on Saturday nights, and I don't want that anymore. I know this sounds trite, but making things simple. Look, Amazon one click made things simple. Apple iPhone made things simple. So simplicity can win a lot of business.
That's a good answer to that. And what about continued innovation and future disruption? Like, how are you going to continually innovate yourselves and disrupt yourselves for future innovation, which is so important in the space? Like you said, you don't want to get to that innovator's dilemma, right?
Yeah. I'd like to believe that we'll get there soon, but I think we got a lot of growth to hit that one yet. Again, our innovation is all going to be, our North Star is never gonna not be, how do we make this simpler? What problem are they focusing on next? And how do we not like take that problem and like bolt it on, but rethink our architecture in a way that obviates that problem. And so, what one things we do have is the software is very mature. We've been shipping the software for 5 years. It works. I mean, it just works, and it's written in our own language, so we can innovate very, very, very quickly. And each quarterly release has just a ton of new functionality. But you're going to see us just eat up simplicity and just a little peek into the future for us. We believe workloads will become more distributed, not more centralized. So imagine what you need to make, if I've got a wind farm, with 500 windmills, and I've got, nooks at the base of every one of those, how do I manage 500 places in a way that has no single point of failure, that allows me to make sure it's still just like one big platform? So stay tuned.
That's awesome. And the great thing about IT, there's always problems to solve. So That's brilliant. Yes. All right, mate, let's finish it on that. So I'd just like to remind everyone out there, if you aren't subscribed or new to the show, please go to GTwGT.com. I'm going to put a link to the show notes that will have all the information about Verge IO. There's a test drive sign-up form there, like you did say. So for everyone there, please have a look at Yan and Verge IO. Thanks for being on the show. And we will catch you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you. All right.